This episode of Off Color is brought to you by the Emancipation Theater Company's world premiere of Jeff Campbell's Honorable Disorder, starring Theo Wilson. The show debuts April 6th and will run through April 29th, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays at the Cleo Parker Robinson Dance Theater, 119 Park Avenue West, Denver, Colorado. A bond so powerful, death could not break it. This is a show that no one can afford to miss. Honorable Disorder. All right, good evening, y'all. Listen, this Black Panther episode went a little bit long, and so much of it was so good that we are not cutting it because it was popping, it was lit, it was everything a Black Panther episode should be, and therefore it is going to be in 2 parts. So please, enjoy. Tonight's episode is brought to you live from Wakanda.
It's not live.
It's not live. It's just in my basement, and we're not in Wakanda either. But I would like to introduce our 2 guests that we have today. I'm so thankful and so grateful that they are here to discuss a few of the topics of the day with us. We have Maria Nagawa. Welcome, Maria. Maria, can you just tell us very quickly just a little bit about yourself? No. Okay, go ahead, honey. You can do it.
Oh, I'm from Uganda. Mm-hmm. Not just originally, I am from Uganda. I am a visiting scholar at University of Colorado, Denver. And I'm a political economist, I will say. Voilà.
Voilà. Okay, très bien. Okay. And then I think some people, if you are a local Denver type, you probably have heard of the great H. Soul, who is what I would consider a blacktivist, a powerful person, and maybe a little bit of a Black Panther hater. So welcome, H. Soul.
What did she just say?
Oh, that's a great intro, isn't it? Great intro.
Poisoning the well.
You know what I'm saying? I love it. I absolutely love it.
Okay. So, Dr. Diggs, I wish everyone could see you right now. No.
The well's been poisoned.
The well has been poisoned, but I was just saying that Dr. Diggs is literally giving me the side eye right now, and people cannot see that. So I will say, H. Soul, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself in the manner that you see fit?
I accept the introduction that was given and eagerly await the conversation.
All right. All right.
Okay. So I think we should just get into what we're getting into. Now, I just want to make a quick drop here. If you hear some noises, that's my child. That's my little king.
Yeah.
Okay. His name is Kingston. He's
if you
hear it, that's my baby.
And the boy.
And we are in the basement of my house, and it is before bedtime.
Yeah,
so
we're recording a little earlier.
We're earlier than usual because this is a very special episode. H. Soul, you ready?
I'm ready.
Maria, you ready?
I'm ready.
Dr. Diggs, you ready?
Ready?
White James, you ready?
I'm ramping up to it.
Oh, Lord. Okay. All right. So let's get the hot take. So I haven't been following you, H. Soul, on social media because I didn't want to get any spoilers. And some of your posts I felt like were a little bit provocative, to say the very least. And I would be very interested to hear kind of your hot take on the film Black Panther.
Ooh. So I get first shot out the gate.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I specifically thought about the perspective that I was going to give, and so specifically for this podcast, right? Because I know the nature of the podcast, and I've spoken on the subject before, so I want to be as succinct as possible, and I also, I want to be as succinct as possible. So let's start there with the premise of it, right?
All right, break it down.
So, for me, my opinion is going to resonate with a smaller group of people.
Is it Hotep type people?
Well,
because you heard me.
I don't really. So I've been labeled Hotep, right? And I don't give that any weight. I've been labeled asshole and other varied names throughout so it comes with the territory. So I don't know what a hotep person is, and I don't think the people who use it really know what it is, given what day of the week they're choosing or what invective they want to where they want it to land. So my perspective is born out of, my perspective is rooted in that I am the son of a Black Panther. I am what is called a cub. And so being a cub, I hold a particular perspective, having been born and raised inside of the Black Panther Party, having a father who was in the Black Panther Party, a mother who was in the Black Panther Party, uncles, aunts, godfathers, all in the Black Panther Party, some who are with us, some who are no longer with us. So my perspective is not one that's going to be shared by a lot of people, and so I have a very unique perspective when it comes to the movie. I have a very unique perspective when it comes to the deep messaging that's inside of the movie, whereas there's two pieces to me, right? There's the piece of me that is the non-thinking, oh wow, this is great. Yes, the colors are great, the action is great, the dress is fantastic, the place is wonderful. The political messaging is probably for me probably one of the more dangerous movies that have been released in the last 20, 25 years as far as what the political messaging is inside of it. And so coming from that perspective, if I can sum it up in one space for it, if you come from the perspective that you think that movies are just movies, or commercials are just commercials, or songs are just songs, then you're not going to get where I'm coming from.
All right, I like that. Now, Maria, who is shortly will be a doctor in like 5 years, right? Just got a pretty exciting acceptance to her PhD program. But Maria, I wanted to ask you, so in response to that, how did you feel in general about the movie? Like, I really liked the way you set up your perspective. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Black power, baby. And all right, Maria, can you speak a little bit about your feelings? Because we've talked about this before going to the film.
I'm going to try to be careful because I'm a Ugandan, and I think this movie was made for Black Americans. And I don't, for sure, it wasn't made for Africans. I don't think. There is definitely something to be said of, we're portraying that Africa had technology, or some part of Africa had technology, but why would we need that technology in the first place? You only need to develop technologies in order to improve your way of life, right? And people don't come up with all the ideas, all the greatest ideas in the world. They get them from other people, from different sources, depending on their needs. So many people will come to Africa and say, we need to do this for Africa. We need to... And I don't think that we need to say that Africa definitely had its great things. But I don't need Africa to be portrayed in the way that a Western person wants Africa to be portrayed. And that's why I feel that this movie is for Black Americans. And while I may disagree with certain aspects of the film, which we can go into later, I still think representation is important. Because I've been to places with representation and I've been to places without representation. And I see what that does to the Black psyche, to not see people of success that look like you. And also to hear people refer to Black people as less than human for various reasons. So I think representation is important. And that's why I think this film is important. And we're having this discussion because this film is there. If this film wasn't there, we wouldn't have this discussion. Right. So I think there is a place for Black Panther, and we shouldn't see it as shut Black Panther down because it's bad. No, let's grow from that experience. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Left it there.
Oh no, there's so much more that we're going to be discussing, but I'd like to get this like Black nerd perspective. Dr. Diggs, can you lean into to the nerd perspective?
Man, she's really taking your introduction needs some work, right?
Ed McMahon of radio.
Haters gonna hate.
Yeah, okay? Clearly.
So I'm not sure. Okay, so I will respond, and what I will say is that I enjoyed the movie. That's number one. A lot of what I enjoyed about it was the fact that when we usually have American films that are either fictional or non-fictional and include African Americans, we only get to see one or two dimensions of African Americans played. I think there were multiple dimensions here. You saw all kinds of black folks. You saw competing philosophies. You actually even had, the Western view of the African perspective and the Western view of the African American perspective. And so I do think I enjoyed it, and I consider it to be a conversation piece where we can move forward and I think we're going to be having a lot of conversations for the rest of the year around this movie. And so the last thing I will say as introduction is I did enjoy it. From my perspective, it is a movie. So when people were talking about it's the second coming of revolution and all this stuff, I'm kind of skeptical of those kind of things because movies are movies. But at the same time, as both of our guests have said, and they're going to probably still be saying, a challenge is that our media has messages both overt and subliminal that we're going to be dealing with, and so let's move forward.
Now, I would like to hear what White James thought of Black Panther. Go ahead, White James. Just getting it warmed up. Go ahead.
No, I don't want to give like a cop-out answer, but I don't have a lot to offer on it. I'm more interested in hearing what people have to say because on a lot of levels, I'm not the target audience, not just on the race level, but I don't watch superhero movies. I don't watch. It was maybe the second superhero movie I've seen as an adult, and I don't get to big blockbusters like at all much because I have 2 young kids at home. So I don't know on a lot of levels. I've read a lot of criticism and I've heard some of what Sol has said, and I get it and I internalize it and I kind of see all those different angles, but I don't have a side on it from a pure entertainment perspective. I enjoyed it. Greg and I went to see it last night. I liked the film. And it makes me think like maybe I do have to watch some of these superhero movies. But it was good, and yeah, I don't want to give like a non-answer, but for me it was like a sort of thing of like if I go to the ballet or something, and I'm just like, okay, I am now neck deep in something I know nothing about on every possible level, and I'm just gonna let it wash over me and kind of
Okay, that was actually the right answer.
Come on.
Well,
It was a test.
I'll drop in like a ding ding ding
I'll
sound.
say something about this. I think it's easy to take things for granted when you already have them. Americans had Black Panthers. They had MLK. They had Malcolm X. They've had Obama, right? You can move forward from there. There are many places in the world. Like I lived in Brazil for several months, and they've not had those same opportunities.
When you say opportunities, what opportunities?
Of people like a civil rights movement.
Okay, but Brazil was the heart of the Quilombos, which were some of the very first places where African revolution took place out in the diaspora.
Yes.
So there's a tradition of that.
And I would like you to go to Brazil today and see how Black people are treated in Brazil.
Oh, yeah.
I was in a class one time in learning Portuguese, and I'm like the only Black student, I think, in this class. And they put on a movie with a Black character in it. This character was practically a monkey. He was just obeying everything the white man said. He'd be like, what, boss? Tell me, boss. No. He had no brain of his own. And of course, the white boss was the bad guy. And I'm like, honestly, they are showing this to an international audience. They are still showing images of Black people like this. And so for me, it's like, I feel like the US is at a point where it's at that many people are not at. I even lived in France. And I remember when, what is this movie? Les Intouchables, the Untouchables came out. I don't know if that's how they translated it in English. And it was like revolution in France. But let me tell you, that type of movie has been seen in the US a dozen times at least. You know? So for me, I think it's easy to take something for granted when you have it already. And I think it's important to think of the people who don't have that. Or think of if you did not have that. Now we can sit here and discuss all the pros and cons of Black Panther because it's there. But it's there. Black kids can see that and say, hey, there's a superhero for Black people. Maybe that superhero is problematic and we can discuss it. But Brazilian kids or Black French kids, are they sitting there thinking, hey, there's a superhero for Black people being portrayed in mainstream media? Or are they still challenging some of the things that you guys were fighting for in the 60s? And are still fighting, for sure, are still fighting. But my experience in some of those places has been, man, we shouldn't be here at this day, in this day and age. We shouldn't be denying, because in such places they deny racism. We shouldn't be at that place. And so I think, while I think Black Panther has its problems and we can discuss them and then grow from there, there are places where they don't even have that opportunity. Or if they do, are discussing that, it's such a fringe thing. It's like on the outskirts of society that they're doing that. So I don't know which is worse. But I think that is worse. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, for me going to see this film, I was the most excited again because I feel like I agree with you, Maria. For me, representation is so important, and as a mixed race person, you hardly ever get to have that representation, like of who you are. Because it's either the people, they will cast them, the light skinned mixed race person as whatever and they don't mention it. They just say that they're Black, right? They don't mention that they're mixed race. And so it's very, I don't know, I just think it's really exciting for all of us to be able to have this film that is showing all of these like beautiful Black people, smart Black people just doing it, Go ahead.
Right. So I see a theme here. We've been talking about representation, and so what I want to do is I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to point to H. Soul, because I think it might be good to talk about. So what was represented, and on what levels was it represented? So there was representation, but I think an important part of the conversation is, what did we actually fully see represented? Brother Soul.
That's a beautiful question. And like I said, when I was going to address this, I'm very specific about, on this episode, what perspective I'm going to be coming from. So the perspective that I'm coming from here is that what we basically saw is the Blackness leadership and the grassroots and who is going to win in that future of that battle. So you have the Wakandans who represent the Blackness leadership. And they represent the Blackness leadership because they're elitist, right? They have captured, by no wits of their own, they just happened to land on resources. It wasn't because they were developed, like Sister was saying earlier. It was just a matter of placement. And since they landed on these resources, not only were they classes with everyone outside of Wakanda, they were classes towards one of their own tribes, and one of the tribes, the gorilla tribe or what have you, said that there weren't that no representatives from the kingship had even visited the outskirts of their own kingdom. So we can't even say that the Wakandans were adept at developing their own Wakanda.
Wow.
Much less what they were going to do for the rest of the world. So that's a class-based piece first that I want to address. Secondly, the grassroots, which is represented by African Americans. Let's be very clear. We never saw anything beautiful or enlightening from the grassroots whatsoever. Nothing, right? Oakland was a shithole. There was no history. There was no richness that came out of Black Americans. The gentleman who represented Oakland and represented African Americans, as the sister said, the target audience, very, very adept at saying that. He was represented as someone that went to Annapolis, then graduated from an Ivy League school, but spoke with a third grade vernacular with us and what's up and hey, yo, what's happening? Come on now. This is the representation. And what we have to understand is that if Black people think right? And that's who's supporting this movie. If black people think that white Hollywood has created a movie that's going to create some type of liberation for them, then we have missed what our history has taught us for the sake of wanting to fall into some, do you remember the time? Black Americans would be the only group of people that would accept a movie like this as being something as uplifting, because we're people that have been deeply, only oppressed people could see this movie as anything uplifting, because the message is that there's an elite class that's going to control the resources and dole them out to the rest of the world. And there's the grassroots who should be eliminated by any means necessary.
I don't even know what to say.
I'm looking at my husband and he's like, Anyway.
All right.
Okay, but if I may say before, I just want to say that I obviously value your perspective, or you would not be in my home right now. Right? And I can't say
Drinking your tea.
That's right.
Right.
And I can't say I disagree with you, except that I feel like, to me, the uplifting piece always comes back to what my son is going to see on the big screen. And so for me, that's the piece that I'm looking at, where I see it as more like my kid is not trying to look at this as from this deep perspective, right? And we saw this little girl in line, and I swear when she said it was her third time seeing this movie, the light in her face was beautiful.
Will your son like Killmonger?
You know my son will.
Okay, but will most children like Killmonger? We're most black people who see that movie, will we like Killmonger? Or is Killmonger the enemy?
So this was my argument. This movie is being made by Marvel. This movie is being made because of the capitalist system that enables this movie to be made. We can't expect that they're going to create a revolution that is going to overturn the system of
right,
oppression.
but that's different than the
exists.
question being asked. The question being asked is what people are going to take away from it, not the mechanics of how the movie is getting made.
So why are we expecting this movie? For me, it's like, why are we expecting this movie to provide that? And so I think that what's more important is to go into the movie informed. And so how do people get informed? So that when they go to see these movies, they are critical watchers or viewers of films like this. And they are not just recipients of anything. And that is, for me, that is a long struggle. Because it's taken centuries to get people to where they are at now. It's going to take a long time to get people enlightened, to get people empowered. It will be a long time. And while that time passes, what happens in between? Do we say that movies like Black Panther should not exist at all?
Yes.
You think that Black Panther should not
don't
exist
know.
at all?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I disagree with the fact that this is going to take a long time. If you look at the Black Panther Party, they had a political education system that completely flipped the script on American society and threatened the whole power structure within 3 years' time. Let's go back 20 years before that with Kwame Nkrumah, the first independent president of Ghana, of Africa. He came over to Africa, learned at the foot of people like John Henry Clark in the Harlem Book Club, and learned about African history, returned to Ghana. When Ghana became liberated, the whole continent was liberated within 3 years. So I don't think that we need to sit here. I think it's false for us to think that the power that we have within us, that it's going to take this long time before we flip things on their head. No, it doesn't take that long at all. Black people are ready. All we are lacking is the political consciousness and the political education. And political education now can take place with, right? We have the technology. Right? The technology is there. So I disagree that it's going to take a long period of time. And I do agree with you, however, that we have to send informed viewers into the movie theater. It's a very dangerous thing to do, to send children into a movie theater without giving them context, without helping them work through the subtle signs and the subtle subliminal messages that are packed inside of a movie like Black Panther.
The reason why I say it's going to take a long time is I've lived in Africa. I have seen these heroes come and go, all men. I've seen these heroes come and go without institutions. Why? Some of these heroes were there for quite a while. And they did not build the institutions to back them up so that when they are gone, it doesn't mean that their legacy also disappears. When Kwame Nkrumah was gone, maybe Julius Nyerere tried, I think. He did something. Nelson Mandela, let me talk about Nelson Mandela. When Nelson Mandela was gone, 40% of black men in South Africa don't have jobs. What legacy is that? So I've seen, like for us, we've seen our parents have hopes and dreams. We've read the books, and what do we live with today? But then I can't give up and say, oh, they failed, they didn't make it. I just think that history is long. And our struggle is long. The enemy has had time to oppress, but we will also fight back. And that fight doesn't mean that this battle lost means the end. It just means that we have to take strategic steps as well. And as Killmonger was saying, we have to know our enemy.
Which is a great segue, right? Because the segue to that would be Kwame Nkrumah was gone. But why? Julius Nyerere was gone. Who facilitated that? What group facilitated that happening?
Most recently, Gaddafi went.
And who facilitated that?
Ask any white person what they think about Gaddafi, like any lay white person. Dictator, evil, killed all his people, blah, blah, blah. They won't talk about all the other good things that were happening in Libya. And I can admit, yeah, maybe he was crazy a little bit, blah, blah, blah. But who is not?
Right. We got George Bush, right?
But guess what? Didn't they turn on him?
You can look at the present day.
Right. We have no room to talk. Right?
Didn't other African leaders turn on him? They turned on him. They allowed the US to invade. Let me tell you, if African leaders today all got together and said, we're going to work together, we are not going to allow our enemies to take control of our resources, to exploit our people, etc. They could do it in a day, but they're not going to cooperate. Yes, the issue is divide and rule.
The issue
and
is,
they've allowed themselves to be divided and ruled by other interests that are not the interests of their own people.
Yeah, so the issue is not so much divide and rule, and that's why I was asking you to answer that question and you didn't answer it. It was the CIA that was responsible for overthrowing Nkrumah. It was the CIA that was responsible for overthrowing Sekou Touré. It was the CIA that was responsible for killing Patrice Lumumba. It was the CIA that the same group the same organization that ended up being a hero in this movie was in fact responsible for overthrowing all of the black political independent institutions. So when you say that there's no institutions on the African continent, I too lived in Africa for 10 years. And I could tell you for this, the first woman in Africa, the first black-owned, authentically black-owned radio station, television station was run by a black African-American woman, Shelley Du Bois, the wife of W.E.B. Du Bois, who was moved there. There were black institutions on the continent. They were consciously and systematically overthrown by the CIA.
And so for me, the question is, who is going to save Africans? Is the CIA tomorrow going to say, we're not going to try to overthrow people anymore? Or are Africans going to say, hey, this is fucked up. Let us wake up. Let us work together against a common enemy.
Has that not happened ever?
I mean, there are times when that has happened.
And what has happened? And that's the story that we have to talk about.
There's times when that has happened, but that is when...
So we can't get into saying like Africans just can't get together and, African presidents aren't working with each other and we are just divide and conquer. No, that's a purposeful program. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. The CIA is working a purposeful program. What you see in place right now as far as African presidencies are African presidents that have been put in place by the CIA. And that's why they don't operate with each other. That's why they don't deal with each other. That's purposefully said. And if there's a black independent president that would arise out of Africa, the same thing that would happen to him, the same thing that would happen to Huey P. Newton, the same thing that would happen to Malcolm X, the same thing that would happen to Martin Luther King. They are eliminated.
So
and if we don't talk about that.
If the CIA is so powerful, because I know about these stories, if the CIA is so powerful and omnipotent or whatever, what is our solution? How are we going to get out of this mess?
The solution is for us to tell the story correctly. And that's why this movie is dangerous. Because if we don't tell the story correctly to our children, if we make Killmonger the enemy and T'Challa the hero without understanding the historical reference points that that they represent, right, then we are doing our children a disservice. And therefore, if we're teaching our children incorrectly and they think that T'Challa's the way to go, that they think working with the CIA is the way to go, if they think that going through the UN is the way to go, all these systems controlled by U.S. imperialism, then we are setting our children up for failure. So the first thing that we have to do is to teach the historical accuracy, the historical truth of what our people are going through, what they've been through, and let our children then come up with the creative ideas to remove ourselves from the situation that we stand in.
And do you think that will happen in 3 years?
It can
That's
happen.
why I
It can happen in
said it's
6.
a long. I believe
It can
that it will
absolutely
take a
happen
long
in
time.
3 years.
So let me ask this question
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Jiggs.
for both of you. Given what you have both said, can this movie serve as a discussion piece to educate adults and children around these issues?
Well, Dr. Diggs, you've been watching my page,
Yes.
and you have seen that the response that people have to me is the same response that a 6-year-old would have to you telling him that there's no Santa Claus, that there's no Easter Bunny, and that there's no the Black Panther that's been. People are emotionally attached to the fantasy that is represented in this movie, and it's massaging a place inside of, like Sister said, the target audience, Black Americans, right? That we have an emotional. I have people accusing me of, why are you taking away my Black joy? Now listen, if your Black joy,
My half black joy is getting taken away right now,
Right.
but I'm gonna go ahead and let you finish.
if your Black joy is connected to a white Hollywood, it's not joy to
damn.
begin with. And that's the thing about Black people.
Yeah.
Our Black joy cannot be connected to white institutions. And that's the problem. It can't be connected to a white vision of what's going on in Africa. And that's the problem with this movie, is that who's telling the story here? Who's saying to us that Killmonger's the bad guy and T'Challa's the correct? Who's telling that? Is that African people's story?
So, if I may, my interpretation of it from watching that is, even though I feel like the setup is, okay, this, Killmonger is the bad guy, I felt like it came across that it was more complicated than that. And I thought it was more nuanced than that. That was my interpretation of it. So I'm watching it because, of course, like, as a Black American, I'm watching it. I know, I used to live in Oakland, whatever. And I feel like that was the story. It was just to me, the film was a piece of art that was trying to capture a lot of things. And it was this idea of, like, we can't have, like, the characters are flawed. Everybody's flawed, right?
Yeah.
The
But
daddy.
some characters lived and some characters died. So who's going to move into the future? Does Killmonger move into the future?
You know he does. He's not dead.
So
Nobody dead in Marvel.
Does the father move on to the future?
The father is in the ancestral land.
That's right. So that's why I said at the very beginning of this is that the movie is making a political statement. And we have to be nuanced enough and clear enough to understand what the political statement is. And the political statement is Black misleadership are the people that should move into the future. And that if you're not with Black misleadership, you will be eliminated.
Oh, you're making it hard because I really like the movie, you guys.
You can still like the movie.
Yes, you
can still like the
But
movie.
This is why I was saying that don't take the movie too seriously. This movie is not life and death, the beginning or end of your dreams.
It's too late for that. Because we have New York Times writers that are telling us that this is the most important piece of work since Malcolm X.
Oh, God.
Oh, fuck
It's
off.
no, I'm saying.
But-
So we
No,
can sit
you
here
have
and
a
ruminate
real
at the
point on that.
table
Yeah.
and say, "Oh, yeah, don't take it seriously." But the society is setting this up to be the biggest piece of material, whether it be artistic or whether it be political. Since Malcolm X, listen to that and understand the implications that white America and the weight that they are putting on this film. So we can say, it's just a movie, whatever. No.
Is that an impression of me?
No.
It's probably an impression of me because I said, don't take it too seriously, don't take it too much to heart.
Have you seen Black people show up to this movie? And you're going to say, don't take... Listen, look, Sister has a big ass Panther medallion on. So how can we on one side of our mouth say don't take it too seriously? You showing up to the movie with shea butter, frankincense on, lions, furs.
Well, excuse me, in my defense, I've had this necklace for a very long time.
Just go into social media and see how people see what black. We have set records with this movie. Black people have made $80 million first day.
No,
so we cannot sit up here and say, "Oh, don't take this movie too seriously." That's too late for that. We're already taking it seriously. So the question is how are we going to educate our people now that we are already behind that ball because we are already taking it seriously? This is not a matter.
Actually, this is a good question for you. How are we going to educate our people in a way that they are going to receive the message and it is going to transform their lives?
So here's a great question. Let me answer that real quickly. So they say that you can't awaken someone who's pretending to be asleep.
Oh, man.
Right? So we can't pretend. Black people in America are just pretending to be asleep. So we can't pretend. It's not our job to wake them as a collective whole. It is our job to educate the children. That's our job, is to educate the children, teach them the truth of what's going on, and the adults are going to have to be left to their own devices because the truth of the matter is most people didn't run north when they had access to the Underground Railroad. Most of them chose to stay on the plantation. The truth of the matter is we don't need to worry about what are we going, are all black people going to travel into the promised land? No, we got to tell the truth, and the people that can hear the truth will follow, get on the Underground Railroad, and we'll keep it moving. For those that want to live in Wakanda and think that that's a reality and think that the CIA is going to help them get there and think that, shea butter and African medallions is what's going to somehow soothe a spot for us and relieve us of the oppression that we feel on every day, then we have to lead them to their devices.
Ooh.
That's a little bit harsh.
That's his style. And then I'm like,
because
I like that.
I am quite sure that the people who are to be left to the people who are going to get on the train are very few, are the minority.
The road to freedom is always seldom traveled by the masses.
And so
Frederick
and there is no way,
He's no way in
this day and age.
I'm doing great work.
There's no way in this day and age that there's going to be some isolated utopia of free black people, free thinking, free-minded.
Like
It's not there. And so even the people who do not want to get on the train because they've bought the lie, we have to figure out how we're going to get them on the train.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, we do.
No, then you haven't studied movements. Because movements are not done by the masses. No, I'm speaking very clearly.
That's why we're still here today having this discussion.
It's because
of
what?
all the movements in the past.
Yes, but what
that
created
made it so
but
that
who
we
created
can get to
those
this point and
movements?
still have the discussion about oppression.
So
and
let's talk
racism.
about it. The Black Panther Party at its height in this country had no more than 4,000 members, tops. But it shaped the world. The UNIA, Marcus Garvey's movement in the 1920s, at its height, had maybe 3,000 members. It shaped the world. The Underground Railroad, most black people didn't get on the Underground Railroad, but yet and still we're sitting here talking about Harriet Tubman and the impact that she had on African Americans. So let's not get it again. We can talk about movement making from the perspective of fantasy, or we could talk about it from the reality of a historical reality of what was taken.
And the reason why we are still having this discussion today is because those millions were left behind.
I'm going to say something superficial here, but I'm going to see how it works. I'm going to suggest that sometimes fantasy does have a revolutionary impact.
Yes.
And my superficial observation of this is Morgan Freeman. Because Morgan Freeman, over many decades, has played God and has been president of the United States.
Yes.
And one of my sort of musings is that that paved the way for Barack Obama. Because
in the white psyche. Yes.
In the psyche. Because by the time Obama showed up, America was sort of used to the idea that an African American could be president.
Right.
Or even could be God.
The possibility of it,
that.
Yeah.
And so I wonder what the implications are for something like that for even stuff like Black Panther, because I do think fantasy, problematic, you got to be critical thinking. And I also think that sometimes the fantasy has unintended consequences that can be actually positive.
So let's follow that thought out. What would that be with this movie? What would be the fantasy that is played out that would ultimately Black people?
I'll tell you one.
Okay.
I'll tell you one.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are going to identify with Killmonger as the hero.
Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of adults, young teenagers, gang members, right? People who are grassroots, people who have, and I love that you said that, Dr. Diggs, because that's exactly my point. People like gang members, people who are ostracized, Black people who are pushed into the fringes of society, we absolutely identify with Killmonger. Hell, I'm already part of a Facebook Killmonger group. Right? Because we understood the psychology behind what the movie was trying to tell us, and we could see through it. But a child is different, right? So I agree with you for people who can discern and be like, oh, you see how they try to do Killmonger. Just the same reason why we love Tupac. Tupac was hated by general society. They try to take this man down, but the young teenagers, the grassroots, we loved Tupac. We loved Mike Tyson. We loved Muhammad Ali. We loved the people. We loved Muhammad Ali when the United States was telling us to hate Muhammad Ali because one, he called himself Muhammad Ali, and the second, he wouldn't go fight the Vietnam War. So you're absolutely right. We identify with that. Now, what will our children take away from it?
That's our responsibility.
That's our responsibility.
Okay, and I feel like White James looked like he wanted to say something. White James, could you speak?
No, I was just going to follow up from what Greg was saying, because I feel like on a really basic level, Dr. Diggs, I think you're just trying to talk about this word representation that we hear is about literally about what faces are on the screen, who's on the screen. There's exactly one scene in Black Panther where two white people talk to each other. And I noticed that because, I like artsy movies, which means I have an extremely white taste in movies. No, I mean,
Right.
really,
That's what's there.
I think
You
about,
and my husband both.
no, I think about like movies that people my age who are kind of into that type of stuff like. We like the Coen brothers. We like
Right.
David Mamet. We
Or
like
maybe
movies
you
that
don't know that many movies outside of your own.
Oh, well,
Right.
there's that. There's that.
Of course.
That's right.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And so the number of movies that are nothing but white dudes talking to each other it's a tremendously long list.
Yeah.
And so it actually stood out to me when there was a scene where two white people spoke to each other
Wow.
in Black Panther. That, I think, is the fundamental conversation about representation that people are talking about, that whatever, things that I take for granted, whatever neurons get fired when I watch two people who look exactly like me on a screen talking, that is my experience of most times that I spend watching media, is something that was provided for Black people in Black Panther. And I think that's the talk of
And
representation.
my favorite scene, and I've seen the movie three times.
Oh, damn.
Black nerd. Oh, sorry.
Black nerd. Unapologetic.
We need more.
Yes.
One of my favorite scenes was when the CIA guy was trying to speak with the mountain, and they were like, ooh, ooh, ooh. You cannot.
Did you hear my joke?
I didn't hear you. Hold on. But that was my favorite because it was like, for once, white man gets silenced. And then they even had jokes. Then they even had jokes. I'm a vegetarian.
I hear
My
you.
don't
joke
like
was,
that. You didn't
I
like that.
So
stand by
okay.
Can I just tell
Yes.
my joke real quick?
Please.
Okay, please. No, but when I did that,
It's your show.
I said, alphas are in the house.
Oh,
Right. That's a good point. Those are actually cute.
That's actually funny.
That's actually cute, dog.
See, you
But
didn't
yes.
believe me. I had jokes. I had a real
So the thing about that, Dr. Diggs, is, and I feel you.
It's okay.
But I want you to remember, and you'll be able to hearken back to George Jefferson. And I took those moments in the movie to be George Jefferson moments, right? Moments that were meant to massage the oppressed people's fantasy of talking to white people and shutting white people up and saying, "Hey, whitey," like George Jefferson would come on.
Honky, right.
But at the end of the day, George Jefferson was an extreme capitalist to the extreme degree who downgraded black women, so I think we have to be careful of those moments where they massage maybe our male ego or even the black ego and say, "Oh yeah, that's high five, brother." But it speaks to a deeper reality of the fact that George Jefferson, right, just like that ape, they're going to depend on and follow what is the European white supremacist paradigm, which is laid out in that movie.
So you know what, so I'm gonna, based on what you just said, I'm gonna revise my feeling as a guilty pleasure.
Because
and I
That shit was still funny.
My favorite line.
And so it comes with stuff.
Was when she was like, "Don't scare me like that, colonizer."
Right.
That was my personal favorite line.
And
so, but that's the same kind of
Right,
feel good kind of thing.
Feel good
it did feel good.
Yes, it
did
does.
feel
But that
good.
character still saves the day.
Which character?
The whitey?
The CIA.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's a
Which I was
problem.
really surprised by.
Absolutely.
I wasn't surprised.
I have
wasn't
maybe an
surprised.
unpopular opinion on this.
Uh-oh.
I read it as he was demonstrating what a white accomplice really looks like.
Oh,
No.
hell. As a CIA agent?
Cut that out of there. Cut that out. No.
Oh, you mean ignore that part?
No. I'm saying that, because he was a CIA agent, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we all know. Okay, CIA trying to kill us, blah, blah, blah. Fine. But my mind was that they said for him to get out of there, and instead he said, put me back in.
That's the
So
whole
let me ask you a question.
white savior-
Why was this? Yes.
That's the whole.
Why
But it was
the
like
CIA
one
paradigm.
thing he had to do.
So-
He was just like one
He was
the
only
question
there
is,
for that.
Yes. Why
Yeah.
was he even necessary?
Right.
Why was a CIA agent, and going to his point, why was any white representation necessary in the movie at all? And if it's going to be a white
You
representation,
know why? Yeah, you know why? Because it's Hollywood.
so we got to be very
Yeah.
clear about that. Of all white people that show up as a ally inside
He
of the
was
movie,
the
it just happens to be
Hobbit.
the head of the CIA who had already admitting to overthrowing African. Listen, that was Killmonger was his dude, and he had already admitted to killing hundreds of black people on that continent.
I know, but I'm still gonna stand by it because I feel like he was showing. This was my impression of
You
it.
get to have your
I
impression.
get to have my feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But was that to me in my mind it was showing like, okay, if you're really gonna be down, if you're really gonna help people out, then you have to put yourself on the line
And kill
he
black
did.
people.
And what he was just blowing up the
And
butt
all the
right
black
here or
people
whatever.
who attend the movie have to be reminded that at the end of the day,
That's right.
the white person.
savior.
But I don't feel. But I felt like that was so like just a little part of it in my mind. I'm sorry, but to me, the scene stealer, right? What's her name?
Which sister?
Okoye. What's her name? Is that her
Okoye
name?
is the
Okoye,
general.
right?
Yeah.
Come on, man. When that rhino licked her face, that was like my favorite part of the movie. I'm
So
sorry,
in
I love that.
order to swallow a razor blade, people usually have to put it inside of an apple.
Oof.
So
And so I see why people saying you're stealing their joy and shit.
listen.
Because I feel like you're stealing my joy. I don't want real talk.
You can keep
Okay.
it. No, you brought him here for real talk. So if
I
you
get
didn't
it.
know,
Listen,
no. If
she
you didn't know,
knew what she was getting.
Right.
That's why I allowed her that fucked up introduction.
Oh no!
That's why I gave her that one.
I knew you were going to do it. I mean, I would say at the end of the day, for me, I consider myself a conscious person, and I definitely see the problems in the film 100%. I don't actually disagree with you.
So here's a
but
good
that's
question.
boring. That's boring.
So I would like to ask actually both of you a question. Actually, are we? In order for us to critique this movie, can we honestly say to ourselves that we would expect white supremacy to produce a movie that would create authentic black joy?
But that's the point I'm trying to make, is that it won't. And so when I go to see Black Panther, I'm not going
You're not
there
expecting
expecting
that,
to
right.
see some revolution. I'm not.
But you do know
But
black
I
Americans
do.
are.
Yeah.
Some are.
But
Most are.
Yes.
We made it an 80 million first day.
oh, we gave
fourth
our money
largest.
again, you guys. We gave our money
Okay, but
again.
this is the thing. This
They
is
got
the
us.
thing. This is the thing.
Damn it.
Is that there are those people who are going to be doing the work that they're doing, which is to make that movie. So what are you doing? That's it.
Are we asking is that an open question?
I mean, like, no, it's like sort of
It's
a
rhetorical.
Okay, but can I
So
also...
the thing is, like, what are we doing? Because people will do what they're going to do. I mean, there's billions of
But
us on the
before we
planet.
get in, I feel like before
But
you
what
get
are you
into
doing?
what are we
Or
doing,
what am I doing?
before
And-
we get into what are we doing, because I feel like everyone at this table is actually doing something. But I will say this: at the end of the film, Maria, my husband was all, I was like, he was crying because he's my husband. He'd be crying and stuff,
Right.
and it's beautiful to me. But Maria said, she said, "Ooh, I hope it wins an Oscar," and I laughed. I said, "Good luck with that," because we know Black Panther's not getting an Oscar.
Why?
That was a great question. Because, and my husband said the same thing. You know, my white presenting husband, but he's like incognito.
Right.
And he said the same thing. He was like, the only way you get an Oscar in this country is if you're getting whipped. That is the only way you can get an Oscar in a Black movie.
Okay, so Denzel Washington got an Oscar
For what?
for killing other Black people.
In Glory.
No, in Training Day.
Again, not a great fucking look for our people.
No, but so I'm saying that's why this movie could get an Oscar, because at the end of the day, Killmonger is dealt with, right? And the Black misleadership is placed as this is the way to go. What happened at the very end of the movie? And I walked out twice, and I never saw the end of the movie. But at the very end of the movie,
What are you doing here, H-Soul? You didn't even see the movie.
No, I saw the movie. I'm saying at the very end, I hear there's a UN scene.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You mean the extra scene.
The extra scene.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Have we really thought about the implications of what that meant?
But for me,
I would
it's
like
like,
to hear your perspective on
how
that,
many?
actually.
I haven't met that many people who know how the international system works. That's my work, right? International political economy. I don't know if I know 20 people who know how it actually works. 20 in my life.
Right.
And I've met hundreds of people,
Right.
right? When I go to see Black Panther, I don't expect so many things. And the thing is that I know that many people put their hopes in this movie, but these people are only alive in a specific number of years, in a certain lifetime.
So you know what's very interesting
And I would
is
like
that,
them to have some joy. I don't want to take that joy away from them.
But that's because you pointed this movie towards Black Americans. So that's a very interesting position that you're taking.
I don't
You
know
have
how
said that
Africans
there was
feel about this movie.
Exactly, and you said that they weren't the target of it. So to say that, let's let, it's almost, and I'm not speaking. It's almost as if you're coming off paternalistic, saying that let those poor Black Americans have their
No,
joy.
let
Hold
him
on,
finish.
let
Let
me
him finish.
let those poor Black Americans have their joy and be caught up because only 20 of them may know how the UN works. But as for the reality, they can't. They're so removed from what the truth of it would be. And what my pushback to that would be is that you don't go and you didn't see that movie because as someone who was part of a target audience. So it's easy for you to stand. It's easier for you to stand back from a perspective of, this wasn't meant for me. And the people that I come from and the historical trajectory that I represent, right? But I would offer to you that's not necessarily true, because what that movie also represents is the Black elitism on the African continent as it relates to Black Americans, thinking that the perspective of Killmonger is the perspective that most Black Africans have of Black American youth. And I could say that because I got off a bus in Kumasi up in the bush, and the first thing that a young teenager said to me is, yo, what's up, nigga? Now, he ain't never been inside of America. He's only heard this reality and this representation. So I would caution you to look at the historical relationship that white supremacy has tried to foster between Blacks on the continent and Blacks in America, and not remove yourself to the degree to say, when I go to the movie, that's not what I'm expecting and that's not what I'm seeing, and instead put yourself in the shoes of people who have, for 400 years, 287 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow and poor representation generation have not had the opportunity to see themselves in a remember the time view, or in a, when I was on the continent of Africa, I saw rituals full of African people. There's none African people dressed in garb like you are. We haven't had that opportunity. So we have to be very clear of why the target audience was targeted the way that it was, and have some empathy rather than that's not what you go to the movie to see.
If I didn't have any empathy, I would not.
No, I don't mean to suggest that you don't
Okay.
have any empathy.
So I don't want to. I didn't want to speak from a personal standpoint. When I cried when Killmonger died.
Yeah.
That was a very painful moment for me to watch but at the same time, I don't want to presume to know the experience of Black Americans. I know my experience as an African. I want to empathize with the experience of Black Americans, not just Black Americans, but that's why I went to Brazil. That's why I was in Cuba. That's why France was such an important experience for me, because I care about the experience of all Black people everywhere. Because if a Black person in any one place is not free, I will not be free. And that's why I say I can't just bundle up 2,000 people and say, oh, the revolution is done. I can't.
No, and I'm not suggesting that you do. What I'm saying is that just as Ghana set the stage and the tone for the whole continent of Africa being set free, it took Ghana and not even
But
Ghana,
you know
but it took
what?
Kwame Nkrumah and his inner cabal of 40 ministers to then set the political stage that would then free the continent in 3 years. That's what I
For
mean
me,
by
my
that.
experience is that what my understanding is that a lot of things are by chance. It is not an accident that a lot of countries in Africa got independence around the 50s and 60s, early 60s, late 50s, mostly early 60s. It was just the time and all the events in the world that happened to bring together this thing. For example, World War II. A lot of Africans went to fight World War II and see white men die. And then come back and say, why the fuck are we still under these men's control? So for me, there are many things that come together to make an event possible. And I can't presume to know, you're saying I felt like you were saying that I should have more empathy for many people who are being misguided by this movie. And the thing is, I can't speak for them. And if they take some joy out of this movie, I am not going to be the person to take that joy away from them. I'm going to say, yes, I have my opinions. And these are my opinions, just like I told you about my opinions on aid, etc. I was telling Rebecca. But I'm not saying that, oh, Rebecca, especially as a Black woman, because I know that Black people have gone through a lot. You're wrong, you're bad. No. I'm Rebecca, there's a problem. There's a problem with with the system within which the work you've done is. So how can we discuss and learn? So when Black Panther happens, I'm not like, oh, it shouldn't have happened, I'm like, let's have a discussion about Black Panther and how can we learn from Black Panther as Black people. And so I don't want to take the experience of Black Panther away from Black people, because sometimes you want your cake, even if you're in a cage. But
Damn.
how can we discuss it and
She
grow?
said, you want your cake sometimes, even if you're in a cage.
Woo!
Jesus. I'm ready to start crying right now. I'm serious, because
Wow,
And that's Black
powerful.
people.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are.
And so that's where, though, when I'm saying my piece about it, where I feel like the film is valuable for my kid, who, he white. But I feel like he's gonna look at this film and feel a certain kind of way about Black people, taking out this idea of, Killmonger is bad and all of that. Stand by, sir. And Greg, you gotta stand by. So taking that out of it, to me, that is still, at the end of the day, I just
You're
think
with
about I'm with it for what it's showing people without the deep nuances, because I'm gonna teach my son what's right.
So, given teaching your son what's right, would you allow your son? So she's saying she wouldn't take something away, but you're a mother. Are you a mother yet? So
Not
you're
yet.
a mother. Would you allow your child to continue to eat chocolate all night? and you don't want to take his joy away because he's
Okay.
You know.
No, I'm not gonna.
and why? Because it's unhealthy, right?
Correct.
And it's our job as parents,
Yes.
to even if it's going to take your joy away,
Yes.
for you to be able to. And as a child, it's not going to understand why you're taking chocolate away from him, right?
But stand by because
But we also
Because-
infantilizing black people if we are like, there are children that don't understand they're giving too much chocolate.
you saw me give my child chocolate.
I did.
I gave him 2 pieces.
Yes.
And then he went to bed.
What if he asked for 4?
He is not getting 4.
Then you're taking his joy away, Rebecca.
But I already gave him a little bit, and he's got to savor it on his lips.
The point is that black people have got so little to be happy about.
Really?
And so
Black people have so little to be happy about?
no, there's of course they've got so much to be happy about.
Okay.
But the system actively works against them.
Yes.
Like
Sure,
I feel
sure.
like I would not raise my children past 5 in this country.
Right. Listen, I moved my children to Africa for that exact same reason.
I would not, because
Right.
then I have to tell them that when the police come, you should like pretend that you're not human. Just be a recipient.
This is deep. So
A
this
black
is a get.
space.
This is a get.
I
sister.
can't tell my child.
You're saying the
that.
same. So this is the point that I was saying that you were doing earlier, and you're back there again. And I want you just to observe it.
Okay.
Now you're talking about that you would remove yourself from the African American experience because of what it is, because of how toxic it is. And I'm with you. Because when my children were 1 and 3, I moved them off of this continent. I grew my children up in Ghana for 10 years because the environment here is so toxic. But because it's so toxic, it's our responsibility to tell the people who are used to the toxicity that, listen, this is toxic.
Right.
You're used to it.
Right.
Some of you are addicted to it. Most of us are addicted to it. It's toxic. It's great.
How do you
toxic.
get someone out of an addiction?
You walk them back. Right?
Walk.
You walk them back, right?
Walk.
Or
don't run. You don't beat them out of it. You don't fly out of there. You walk them out of that situation.
Yes.
And that's why I said it's a slow process.
Okay,
And
but
I'm not
how long have we
saying
been at
that-
it?
I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that for me, and that's why I'm also like, it shouldn't be about the few 1,000, 2,000. Let me take those and I've done. It should be about how are we going to get the black population out of a system of oppression. And it will not be just my generation that will do the work. I believe that my children's generation, likely
Absolutely.
their children's generation, is going to have to do that work.
And you just explained, funny enough, what Wakanda represents. Wakanda represents the few. Wakanda represents fuck the rest of the world. Let's close off our borders and let whatever the hell is going to happen to those Negroes happen. Because we need to preserve what's for us. And that's why I said that's the view of black misleadership. That's the view of the Oprah Winfrey's. That's the view of the Michael Jordans.
I feel like at the end of the movie, they addressed that. Although the avenue was wrong, the avenue was definitely wrong. The UN is not the right avenue to address the liberation of black people around the world. But they address it.
Yeah, but it's wrong. So addressing
And so
it.
now at least I can say, because we've seen Wakanda, and I can say to an audience of black American people, would I have had this audience if Wakanda hadn't happened?
No, so no one's not saying that
So-
Wakanda should not, that the movie should not have happened. We're not saying that Black Panther should not have been made. What we're saying is within white supremacy that we need to understand that movie represents white supremacist ideas. Period. So yes, they have
Well, you said period. So here's where I want to interject because I think that what I love about the movie and what I love about this discussion, but what's a little bit problematic, and I don't think this discussion is really problematic, is that we tend to think in these dichotomies, where it's got to be one way or the other. I think what everybody has been saying is actually real and what we need to be talking about. It's not about who's going to win, the argument. It's like all these perspectives are in play. And I think that the movie provided a vehicle
for the discussion.
for that.
I agree.
For that.
A teaching
and it's
teaching tool.
dangerous if you just view it as entertainment.
And you're Dr. Diggs.
I agree
so
with-
Dr. Diggs, do most, and I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to answer the question. Are most black people that go see that movie, are they going to just accept it as entertainment, or are they going to sit down and have a critical...
So I will answer your question. I do agree with you that most will, but I'm going to challenge you and
You
say
think that most will what?
most black folks who say will not do a critical consumption of the movie.
Right.
And though I'm going to also challenge you, because and this is going to get you going.
I hear
you know.
What doesn't get him going?
But for some people, a movie is just a movie.
A movie is just a movie.
And it is problematic.
Yes.
But even for some of the people who a movie is just a movie, that doesn't mean that they can't critically, that they don't understand going in that it's fantasy, not reality.
Okay, so here's my pushback on that. We had a television show here in the United States. You may be a little young to remember it, but there was that's not a slight. I'm saying really, she may be a little too young to remember that. She's 29 or 27.
Why are you telling people's ages on the
She-
goddamn show?
Edit that out.
About
I'm sorry. Edit that out.
We'll edit it out.
Edit. No, you don't have to. You don't have to.
all good.
There was a
Now
movie.
it's in.
Right?
I could have pulled it out, but
Right, now it's in.
oh,
The power. So this is why, and because I taught media literacy, there was a television show called The Cosby Show
Yep.
in the 1980s.
Why wouldn't I know it?
No, I'm not talking because I'm not talking about The Cosby Show.
Oh, okay.
There was a spin-off of The Cosby Show called A Different World.
My favorite show, first time representation of a mixed race person, Freddie. Hey!
Yes, so you see what just happened there, and that's not even my main point. But she remembers it and the impact that it had on her. So a television show is not just a television show. But I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. But then we move into there was a character on that show called Dwayne Wade.
Right.
Dwayne Wayne. Dwayne Wayne. Does anybody remember what Dwayne Wayne was studying when he was in?
Mathematics.
He was an engineer major.
Engineer.
After that show for the first 3 years, two things happened. There was an explosion of enrollment of black people inside of historically black colleges, which had not happened in the 20 years prior to that show coming out. And there was an explosion of people, black men and women, who began to major in mathematics, engineering. So we cannot sit around and just say a show is just a show, a movie is just a movie, a song is just a song. No, we know that they have psychological
I agree,
impacts
and I
on
agree
people.
with that. I'm just saying that in how people enjoy things and consume things, this is part of your point. A competing reality, because I do agree that a movie is not just a movie.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that many people, this is your point too, many people consume it that way. And that is a reality. And I think also then within that is that not everybody who consumes it that way is only locked into just that way. I do think that there are some, not the masses maybe, that are some who just say, you know what, I'm just going to go see this movie, and I'm just going to enjoy this movie as a movie. And I deal with reality and
As it comes.
critical thing. No, not as it comes. But I think there's some
What I mean
people,
is on a base-to-base basis.
well, I think that it doesn't inhibit everybody's ability to be critical thinkers.
Right. I get that.
And be engaged and stuff like that. But I do still agree. I think the masses,
They're not going to get
It's-
it. So that goes
yeah.
to this point, Rebecca, and this is what I would like to ask you, in understanding the implications of that movie, because I understood the real-time political implications of that movie. We, as black people in this country, active black people, activists, social activists who have been fighting for black people's rights, have just been given a specific label of black identity extremist.
yes.
Ugh.
Yes.
No.
That is the real political reality on the ground. That's not fantasy. That's not Wakanda.
That's reality.
That's not. That's the reality on the ground. In that movie, we were shown what will happen and who will have to deal with the black identity extremist. That's what the heart of that movie is about. That black people who are in positions of power, who have resources that they have hoarded away from the masses of black people, are to deal with black identity extremists, people who want to share resources because we're tied together in struggle. And let's be clear, Killmonger was not just about black people. He said, give this to oppressed people all around. Black, white, brown, yellow, oppressed people. So he had a class consciousness too, which made him socialist. That's a whole nother story of what they're feeding black people with. So when black people walk out of that theater, we have to understand they are walking into a political reality inside of the United States that says, listen, if you think like Killmonger, you may be listed as a black identity extremist and you will be dealt with accordingly. Just like the brother that was arrested in Texas, Houston, 3 weeks ago, and he's the first black man that has been charged under that marking of a black identity extremist.
And you'll be dealt with by black people.
Oh, that's who killed Killmonger.
Right.
That's who they have to deal with, because if white supremacy were to do it, we'd be up in arms. So that's what black misleadership is. That's why on the plantation, it was black slaves that were whipping black slaves 9 times out of 10. It wasn't a white man that was going down there whipping black slaves so black people could directly see who was the power structure behind it. It was the head nigga that was put out there to whip the boy in the field. Just like it's the black policeman that's sent into black urban neighborhoods around this country. That is the system that is set up. And we have to be clear that even after we go watch that movie, that there are real-time political implications that that our black boys are going to walk out into based upon what's set up inside of that movie.
So after we saw the film, if you don't mind me mentioning your husband, is that okay? Mm-hmm. So Maria's husband, who is of the Caucasian persuasion, he shares your beliefs, Age Soul, like your opinions on that. He was like, so the movie we're supposed to take away from this movie that, Black Panthers, black identity extremists should die, and it's okay if we build a community center. And I
wow.
I
just laughed, and that's not even really funny.
Stings.
No,
That's not even funny.
It's true.
Because it's true.
Because
it's true. And so I feel like, that hearing it like that does make me uncomfortable.
Can I ask a question? How many people here don't like Nelson Mandela?
And when I say don't like, I say he's problematic. Because nobody walks out of prison after 20 years and becomes president of a country unless he's in on the cut. And if you look at what happened with... So that's a problematic question you're asking. That's a rabbit hole you may not want to go down. But
that's the issue. That is Black Panther. It is our heroes. And that's what I was trying to say. Our heroes sold out. You want to know why Africa is the way it is? Our heroes sold us out.
Or were killed.
Some were killed.
Most were killed.
Many.
Yes,
killed.
many. Let's settle on
many. Were killed, and many sold us the fuck out.
That's true.
Like Mugabe.
She's right. Woo. Or Obama.
Yeah, Obama. And you know Exactly. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you are saying, and I'm going to have to say. I have to say right now, no.
They have been the inspiration for many black people who came after them.
To do what?
Okay.
And so I want to be able to discuss the problems with those people, but I can't. I wouldn't be able to discuss the problems with those people if they didn't exist.
Oof.
Okay.
If they were never in the position they are.
So that is why we are going to take a little bit of a break right now.
All right.
So we're going to take a little bit of a break.
That was excellent.
All right, y'all, this concludes part 1 at this time. If you are interested in hearing part 2, and I know you are, you need to subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, Off Color Podcast, follow us on Twitter at Off Color Pod, and then you too can have the mysteries of Wakanda unleashed.